This was the moment the signal died. Not metaphorically, literally. If you were watching Fox News last night, around 9 p.m. Eastern Time, you witnessed something that has not happened in more than a decade in American politics. The deliberate interruption, live on air, of a sitting president, not due to a technical failure, but by editorial decision. Donald Trump was standing at the podium speaking in an agitated tone about law and order, attempting to justify a federal operation that had just taken place in Dallas. The speech followed the familiar pattern: criminalization, hardline rhetoric, attacks on sanctuary cities. Then it happened. The image froze. The audio dropped. 3 seconds of absolute silence. When the signal returned, Trump was no longer on screen. Instead, the Fox News studio in New York appeared. The anchor, visibly shaken, held a sheet of paper that trembled slightly in his hands. He looked directly into the camera and said just 5 words: "We cannot show this to you." There was no apology, no technical explanation, no attempt to soften the moment. It was a clean cut, final. At that instant, something far larger than a speech was interrupted. What was interrupted was the symbiotic relationship that built the modern American right. From that moment on, the truce was over. To understand why Fox made such an extreme decision, it is necessary to understand what happened in Dallas and why this incident crossed a line that even conservative media was unwilling to defend. This was not a routine ICE raid. It was not a limited immigration enforcement action. It was a federal siege. The target was Holy Grace Tabernacle, a conservative evangelical megachurch in Dallas, Texas, with approximately 15,000 active members located at the heart of the Texas Republican electorate. This was not a progressive church. It was not a left-leaning institution. It was part of the Republican Party's historic base. The church's pastor, Jeremiah Walls, had prayed with Trump in the Oval Office. He was well known in conservative circles. But in recent months, he had made a quiet decision, opening the church's underground gymnasium to temporarily shelter immigrant families, primarily women and children, fearing intensified federal operations. He called the space Jericho Sanctuary. At 4:30 p.m., federal teams arrived. They did not knock. They did not present a warrant to church leaders. An armored vehicle breached the front gates while the youth choir was rehearsing. Witnesses described immediate chaos. Federal agents in tactical gear advanced into the sanctuary. Flashbang grenades were deployed in the entry hall. Smoke filled the space. Children began screaming. The pastor attempted to intervene, holding a Bible, pleading for them to stop. He was struck in the face with the butt of a rifle and fell bleeding. In the basement, where women and children were gathered, tear gas was deployed in an enclosed space. Panic spread. People rushed toward the single exit. Several were trampled. 3 children remained hospitalized in critical condition. All of this was streamed live on the church's Facebook feed before the footage spread through local media and then reached national newsrooms. Under normal circumstances, a narrative machine activates. Language is adjusted. Frames are selected. Blame is reassigned. But this time, the spin failed. For a simple reason. The victims were Fox News' audience: evangelicals, conservative families, churchgoers. The pastor was a frequent Fox guest. The church represented exactly the voters who sustained Fox's ratings. According to reports from outlets such as Vanity Fair and Drudge Report, an emergency conference call took place around 5 p.m., involving Lachlan Murdoch, Fox News executives, and top anchors. The assessment was cold and clear. Defending this would mean breaking with the evangelical electorate. Evangelicals tolerate many things, but they do not tolerate the overt violation of a church, especially when children are involved. At that moment, Trump ceased to be a political asset. He became a toxic liability. The order was given: do not defend. The 9 p.m. address was the chosen moment. Trump began justifying the operation, calling the pastor a co-conspirator and describing children as human shields. Fox allowed him to speak for a few minutes, long enough for him to expose himself. Then they cut the feed. The anchor's commentary that followed entered the network's history. What we saw in Dallas was not law enforcement. It was a violation of the American conscience. We cannot, in good faith, broadcast the defense of the indefensible. For the first time in more than 10 years, Fox News publicly broke with the MAGA narrative during a breaking news event. The shockwave was immediate. When Fox moves, the rest of the empire follows. The next morning, the New York Post ran a black and white cover, a child being carried from the scene with the word unforgivable printed in red. The internal editorial labeled Trump unstable, dangerous, and unfit for office. The Wall Street Journal went further. In an editorial, it stated that a president unable to distinguish between a church and a drug cartel is not fit to command the executive branch. It linked the Dallas operation to recent economic turbulence and described Trump as an agent of chaos. This editorial was not symbolic. It was a signal to donors, senators, and financial elites. When the Journal turns, the Senate understands that it is free to turn as well. Inside the White House, the reaction was described as chaotic. Trump was watching Fox when the cut occurred. He believed the television had malfunctioned. He threw the remote. He attempted to call anchors. No one answered. He tried executives. Nothing. For the first time in a decade, his direct line to Fox was dead. Without Fox, Trump loses the megaphone. Without the megaphone, he loses narrative control. Without narrative control, only the radical base remains. He turned to Truth Social. He posted attacks, accused the Murdochs of betrayal, attempted to redirect viewers to smaller outlets. But those outlets lack reach. They lack advertisers. They do not shape national opinion. The strategic error was devastating. Trump believed evangelicals would remain loyal regardless of circumstance. But attacking a church shifted the moral axis entirely. Conservative religious leaders began speaking out. The language changed. Defenses stopped. For Fox, the choice was clear. Lose part of the radical MAGA base, or lose the entire Bible Belt. They chose the church. This division is not reversible in the short term. A divided base cannot win elections. A divided base cannot sustain a presidency. A divided base accelerates investigations, lawsuits, and political defections. Trump retains formal power, but he has lost something more important: ambient dominance. Without the Murdoch media ecosystem, he cannot control the news cycle. He cannot shape the moderate voter. He cannot reassure institutional donors. He keeps the cult, but he loses the country. What we are witnessing is not merely a media dispute. It is the collapse of the infrastructure that sustained Trump's political power. And when that infrastructure falls, the collapse stops being rhetorical, it becomes structural. This was the moment the signal died. And when the signal dies, power disappears with it.